Hey guys, how's it going? It's Chris here, and would you look at that? Another document up on screen. Today we're going to be looking over the backstory that I wrote for Kari Hikono, Tansu's mother. I do want to preface this again by saying this is an older document, so not everything. This is to be considered loose canon, but this is still like in my mind her backstory, even though none of this is explicitly expressed in the story as we see in the books. This was just kind of for me organizing this was just kind of for me organizing the character. So I will say that, like, take this with a grain of salt. Don't say this is like biblical. This is not 100% canon. This is not to be followed as truth. It's just kind of like this is what was in my mind, even though it's not in the story. So I also don't know if that date is correct. Like the birthday, this might be wrong. I might have updated that at some point. I don't quite remember. I do believe September 22nd is her birthday, but I don't know if 1964 was entirely true. So anyway, we're gonna go through and just kind of read through this. It's not too long. It's a couple pages. And yeah, here we go. Hikari Konoma was born to a modern but culturally traditional family in a small village in Japan on September 22nd of 1964. Before her mother, Anya, got pregnant, she worked as a teacher for grade schoolers. She was able to continue working through most of her pregnancy, but eventually had to take time off of work to have her child. Again, I want to say real quick, this was written very quickly, so it's not like the best grammatically. It's not the best structured. It's just kind of messy, but it's just like it's so it exists kind of thing. Her husband Gene spoke. Gene spoke worked. See, just like that. Her husband Gene worked as an international sales representative, which required him to speak English along with Japanese. He was quite adept at his job, and between their two occupations, were able to sustain an upper middle class living. After Hikari was born, her mother decided it best to stay at home full time to raise and educate her until it was time for her to go to school. Then she would return to work. However, when Hikari was just 2 years old, an American electronic trade company, whom her father had prior relations with, offered him a job in America as their lead bilingual sales professional. The caveat being, of course, he and his family would need to relocate to where the company was located out in Texas. He graciously accepted this offer and within the year moved the entire family of three to America. Anya, however, found it difficult to adjust and find work given her language and experience restrictions because she was not too bilingual. She had learned plenty of English from Jean back home, but found it difficult to fluently apply herself in conversations. So she spent most of her time raising Hikari while Jean financially supported them. Whenever he could, Jean helped his wife learn more of the language and even got her language instructor whenever he was off on business. During this time, Anya and Jean passed along these lessons to their daughter in the hopes that she would learn English as her primary language and eventually she would learn Japanese second. Amazingly, now going as Kari, picked up on both languages extraordinarily well and seemed to have a sharp mind for her age. She was extremely adaptive in most situations as well as curious about the world around her, which gave her parents ease of mind about her educational and social future. Months after they moved to America, Anya became pregnant with their second child, and within that year, she gave birth to a healthy boy who they named Kento. It was around this time that Hikari took on the nickname Kari. They did not believe in giving themselves English names and instead chose to stand by their culture and wear their foreign names proudly. Kento was a lot like his sister and mother in the way that he seemed to have an aptitude for education. Though he didn't learn Japanese along with English, he did pick up English just as quickly as Kari. The two siblings were very close with each other and their mother, as she still could not find a job and spent all of her time at home with her children. Kari had started school at the appropriate age of 5 and astonished her teacher with how well she could speak at her age and how focused she was during activities. She seemed to be doing well outside of getting sick often enough to cause some concern. Nausea and headaches were the most common, but sometimes her fever would reach alarming levels for seemingly no reason and she would be bedridden for a short time. They had her examined numerous times by a local pediatric center, but never discovered anything besides symptoms of a common cold. When Kari was 6 years old, her mother had a third and final child, another girl who they named Sachi. Unfortunately, Gene was on a business trip out of the state, and his flight home was delayed due to poor weather conditions, making him miss his daughter's birth. This instance caused a heavy guilt to weigh on his shoulders, making him question which was more important, his job or his family. All of the children grew up alongside their mother, but unfortunately did not spend a lot of time with their father because of that. His work had him traveling all over America and back and forth from Japan. It's true, the company had other employees with the same qualifications, but nobody was as charismatic and refined as he was. Plus, he had actual living experience outside of the States, which made him the primary candidate for many business endeavors. Kari, being older, though still a child, had it explained by her mother why he was not always home with them. She mostly understood and was surprisingly complacent with the situation. However, by the end of that year, Gene had decided to turn down trips and take some vacation time, giving him more time to spend with his family without affecting their income all that much. When Kari was 11 years old, her constant sickness took a drastic turn when she approached her parents in terrible condition. Her skin was pale, eyes bloodshot, and her nose was dripping fluid along with painful coughing fits. They did everything they could to reduce her fever and clear the cough, but nothing was working. For a few days, her cough persisted and her condition rapidly grew worse. That night, Kari became unable to breathe properly. Panic set in, and they rushed her to the emergency room. The doctors were able to stabilize her and ran some extensive tests. It was discovered that Kari had immunodeficiency, which over the time had developed an asthmatic condition. Her parents were terrified with what this could mean for their daughter's future, but within a few hours, she was sent home with a prescription for antibiotics, special vitamins, an inhaler, and a tight schedule of follow up appointments. Kari began to fear this condition. However, she refused to let this hold her back in life. Though the next few years in school, Kari excelled in nearly every class, every day spent with her nose buried in her books and her pencil pressed against the blue lined pages. She excelled so much that upon graduating middle school, she was invited to attend a private high school for gifted teens. Here, she took on new languages as well as advanced mathematics, literature, and science. Her mind was stressed, and annual sickness tested her resolve, but she pushed through. In her junior year, her small class went on a field trip to the Providence Performing Arts Center in Rhode Island. This was a big event for her. Due to her immunodeficiency, she was exceptionally prone to any illness, and too much stress could also cause her asthma to act up, so her mother never let her go on many trips, and the ones she did get to go on had Anya as a chaperone, but not this time. This was her first trip without her mother's company. Nervous and excited, she stuck close to her select group as they navigated the streets to the arts center. Things were going well until she got separated from her group due to a large parade taking place on the street. Completely lost in this foreign place with no means to contact the group, she began to wander alone. She searched for any landmark to help place her, but due to the parade, many roads were closed off. After nearly an hour of wandering through the city, she started to panic. Feeling her lungs tighten, she reached for her inhaler, but it wasn't in her bag. Her heart rate rapidly accelerated, which brought a dizziness upon her. By the way, if you hear any kind of noises in the background, I'm playing with the arm of my chair. I am not farting. I just want to state that I'm playing with it's leather. I keep pulling at it. She stumbled by a handful of buildings until finally she collapsed outside of a coffee shop's roadside window. Inside the shop was a man who witnessed the collapse and rushed to her aid. This mysterious person was a Japanese American medical student, more specifically an EMT in training. He helped her stay calm and try to control her breathing, while he did this, he instructed the other guy he was with to bring out a hot cup of coffee for her to drink. This helped open her airways and made breathing much easier to control. He then asked if she had an inhaler, but she was unable to say much. Instead, she pointed to her bag. He picked it up, and to her surprise, he found the inhaler wedged between a book and her small lunchbox. With his help, she was able to stabilize and recover. He invited her into the coffee shop and introduced himself as Nakito Hikono, or Naki for short. And the person who grabbed the coffee was his brother Tomasu, but she could call him Tom. She greeted them formally and gave her name as Hikari Konoma, or Kari for short. With tensions diffused, she took the time to examine her savior. Naki was a slightly stocky man with rectangular glasses, short black hair, big ears, and a beaming smile. He looked a couple of years older than her. The two began talking and she explained her situation, telling him that her mom would be horrified to learn that something like this happened on her first time on her own. Luckily, he was from a nearby town and was familiar with this area, especially with the arts center, with it being such an attraction. And she was relieved to hear, but but still expressed concern about her mother finding out. He was very sweet and responded by saying that the mysteries of each day we face, every uncertainty, every obstruction is necessary in our growth. Without that experience, how can anyone expect to blossom into their own? I don't know what I was doing there. I was being poetic, I guess. His words struck deep, making her stop and think about her sheltered life thus far. As a child, she concluded this sickness would not hinder her life in any way, but it has. Her life has been school and her loving mother, which up until now was enough. But now she understood that there is more to life than what she previously had known. Though she still adored education and wanted to pursue it, a new desire had wormed its way into her heart, a desire for another. She looked up to him with tender eyes, and he blushed. It was at that moment that Tom made his exit, quietly, leaving just the two of them to soak in the developing atmosphere. They chatted for a bit longer until he offered to escort her to the arts center, to which she graciously accepted. Within the hour, she was returned to her group, and the two gave a heartfelt goodbye. Kari attempted to give her attention to the instructor and guides, but found herself taken by the thought of him. It wasn't until later on the bus ride home she discovered a small note inside of her purse, wrapped around her inhaler, 10 digits, and a name, Naki. Upon returning home, Kari kept the incident a secret and instead contacted Nakito. The two spoke regularly for a few weeks, with Kari never mentioning him or what had happened to her parents. She kept it a secret so that her mother would have no reason to worry. However, after about 3 months of talking with her, Nakito convinced her to tell her parents about what had happened. She was reluctant at first, but understood that they deserved to know. Finally, one night after dinner, she separated the two from her siblings and sat down with them to explain what had happened during the trip. At first, they were scared and frustrated with her, but she had mentioned him coming to her rescue. Their concern switched to interest. Her dad was cautious about the whole situation, but understood their position as parents. He knew she was no longer a child, and it was time for her to start making decisions for herself. So he bit his tongue and listened to what she had to say. To their surprise, she expressed a desire to finish school and go to college, and that this boy would not change her ambition. However, she feels something for him, not just because he stopped to help her, but how he has shown such care and attention in the short time she has known him. She told them she wants to include him in her life and needs their acceptance. Their response was as she had hoped, a blessing. It was then that Kari and Nagito had begun their relationship. Kari had gone on to finish high school with near perfect marks and got a full ride to college, and by the time next semester had come along, Nagito had decided to move to Texas to be closer to Kari and further his own education as an EMT. With financial support from both of their parents, the two were able to rent a cozy apartment nearby school as she spent the next 4 years earning her bachelor's degree. Within that time span, Kari and Akito had lived stressful lives but managed to keep each other through this introduction to a drastic educational period. The strongest factor that helped preserve their relationship was when Akito proposed to Kari soon after she earned her degree. She accepted, and the two remained engaged until they could finish school. Now that the first phase of her education was done, she strapped in for another 4-year endurance test as she went for her doctorate. Their relationship was stronger than ever now, and by this time Nakito had finished his EMT intermediate training and was a full-fledged paramedic. Now working to support them while she finished school. Near the end of her last semester, Kari made an exciting yet frightening discovery. She was pregnant. By the end of it all, Kari had graduated with a doctorate in literature and majored in literary theory and criticism. Now, with a history of education, a baby on the way, and an open road ahead of them, the two finally got married and moved away from Texas to pursue a life together. Sights set on Rhode Island, where they had met. Upon arriving and settling down in their own home, Nakito easily got a job as a paramedic, while Kari held off on getting a teaching position until after the baby came. Up until she gave birth, Kari started her own private tutoring business that specifically focused on languages such as English, French, German, and Japanese. Aside from that, she offered a service that simply helped high schoolers and college goers with specific areas that they needed to improve in. Then, in the spring of 1988, Tansuki Hikono was born. Most of the time, Kari was still able to offer her tutoring services, even with a baby in the house, so she was still able to contribute financially. It wasn't until Tansuki started kindergarten that Kari secured her position at a local college and began her career as a college professor, and on the side, she still offered her private lessons. So that is what I wrote for Kari's backstory. Again, it's not 100% canon. It's not definitive because it's not in any published works. If it's not in a published work, it's not technically canon, but I do still consider this general timeline to be the backstory. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you think down in the comments below, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.